Lionel Messi had never been one for grandiose attention. Even with his legendary status as one of the greatest footballers to ever live, Messi found solace in the quieter moments of life. While millions around the world admired him, he was happiest in the company of those who didn't see him as a global icon but rather as just another person. So, when his close friend invited him to a wedding in a small village in Argentina, he readily agreed, expecting a peaceful day away from the constant scrutiny of the press and fans. The venue was a charming rustic hall, tucked away in the countryside. The wooden beams in the ceiling were draped with ivy, and long tables were adorned with fresh flowers. It was the kind of place where you could feel the warmth of a family celebration without the distractions of the outside world. Messi wasn't concerned about his privacy being invaded here. He had been to weddings before where the focus was purely on the couple, not on him. As Messi entered the hall, he was immediately greeted by the laughter and music that filled the air. The guests were an eclectic mix of friends and family, some of whom had known the bride and groom since childhood. There was a sense of familiarity in the atmosphere that made Messi feel comfortable. His casual attire, jeans and a light jacket, blended in with the crowd, ensuring he didn't stand out. Messi took his seat at a table near the back, preferring to remain a quiet observer rather than the center of attention. He had no intention of drawing anyone's gaze, but he had also learned to accept that no matter how hard he tried to blend into the background, his fame often had a way of making itself known. Still, he hoped that today, he could enjoy the festivities like any other guest, without any interruptions. The ceremony was beautiful. The bride, a childhood friend of the groom, looked radiant as she walked down the aisle, her veil sweeping across the floor. Messi couldn't help but smile at the sight of the couple, their love so palpable in the room. He sat back in his chair, allowing himself to get lost in the moment. For once, he didn't have to worry about football matches, training sessions, or the pressure of living up to expectations. He could just be a guest at a wedding, sharing in the joy of two people who had decided to spend the rest of their lives together. After the vows were exchanged and the reception began, the mood lightened. The guests were enjoying the food, the wine, and the live music. Messi was content to remain in the background, chatting with a few of the bride and groom's relatives, but he was careful not to take up too much of anyone's time. He wasn't there to dominate the event, and he was glad that the other guests seemed to respect that. But as the night wore on, the inevitable began to unfold. Someone at the table next to him recognized him. It started with a glance and unmistakable look of disbelief before one of the younger guests, a teenage boy, leaned over to ask, "Are you Lionel Messi?" Messi, always gracious, nodded with a smile, knowing that this moment was coming sooner or later. The boy's eyes widened. "Oh my God, it really is you," he exclaimed, a bit too loudly for Messi's comfort. He quickly lowered his voice and whispered, "I'm such a huge fan. My whole family is, actually." Messi chuckled, his unease still lingering. "Thank you," he said softly, hoping the boy would return to his own conversation. But it wasn't that simple. The teenage boy, now visibly excited, leaned toward his parents, pointing in Messi's direction. Soon, other guests started noticing, and whispers began to spread through the room like wildfire. It was only a matter of time before a small group of people, all grinning from ear to ear, approached him. "Messi, is it really you? We just have to take a picture," one woman asked, her hands clasped in front of her in an almost prayer-like fashion. "It's an honor to meet you. My husband will never believe this." Messi was taken aback. He had not come here to be the star of the evening. But looking around at the eager faces, all full of admiration, he realized there was no way to avoid it. He tried to politely decline, but the woman insisted, her excitement only growing. "I promise it'll only take a minute," she added. "Just one photo for our family album. Please." Messi sighed, realizing there was little chance of avoiding the request. It wasn't out of arrogance or frustration, he understood the thrill of meeting someone you admired. He had been in similar situations himself, though it was rare to encounter people as famous as himself. He couldn't bring himself to say no. His fans had always been respectful, and he felt it would be rude to dismiss them on such an important occasion. "Okay, just one picture," he said, trying to sound as casual as possible. The group cheered and quickly organized themselves around him. Messi tried his best to remain calm, but he could feel the eyes of the entire room on him. He was no stranger to being the center of attention, but this was different. This wasn't a stadium or a promotional event. This was a private celebration, a moment that was supposed to belong to the bride and groom, not him. As the pictures were snapped, Messi felt increasingly awkward. He smiled politely, trying not to show how uncomfortable he was with the situation. Despite his best efforts to stay in the background, the very act of taking the photo had drawn all eyes in the room to him. Whispers turned into giggles, and before long, more people were making their way toward him, eager for a moment with the football star. "Could you sign my napkin?" "Just this one thing, please," a man asked, holding out a crumpled napkin and a pen. Messi hesitated for a moment before taking the pen and signing his name with a smile. It wasn't that he minded doing these things, it was part of the territory. But he had hoped to be a silent observer tonight, not the subject of everyone's attention. As he signed a few more autographs, the realization struck him: this wedding, a day meant for love and celebration, had inadvertently turned into an impromptu Messi fan event. The bride and groom, who had been swept up in the excitement of the day, were now looking on from a distance, smiling at the spectacle. Messi's instinct was to withdraw, to retreat back into his seat and fade into the crowd. But there was something about the warmth of the guests, the kindness in their faces, that made him want to stay. They weren't looking at him as a superstar, they were looking at him as a person. A person they admired, sure, but a person nonetheless. He turned to the bride, who had approached him with a gracious smile. "I hope this isn't ruining your big day," Messi said quietly, his voice tinged with the humility that had always been a part of him. "Oh no, don't worry," she replied, her face lighting up. "This is actually amazing. Our wedding will be remembered forever, thanks to you. You've made it so special for everyone." Her words, though kind, made Messi feel even more out of place. He hadn't meant to make their day about him. But as the crowd continued to gather around, he knew there was no escaping the moment. For better or for worse, Messi had become the star of the wedding. As the evening wore on, Messi continued to smile and politely sign autographs, all the while trying to remain as humble and unobtrusive as possible. The wedding was supposed to be a celebration of love between two people, not the stage for his fame. Yet, as he looked around, he couldn't deny that he had become part of the story. The crowd that had gathered around him seemed to grow by the minute. His face, so familiar to fans around the world, was now on everyone's lips. Even though the initial awkwardness had faded, Messi couldn't help but feel like he was standing at the center of an impromptu event. Despite his best efforts to retreat into the background, he realized that he was now tied to this wedding in a way he hadn't expected. But the more he thought about it, the more he began to see things differently. The attention was coming from a place of genuine admiration. The guests weren't asking for selfies or autographs out of mere curiosity, they were doing so because they saw him as more than just a football player. They saw him as an inspiration. Messi had always been known for his modesty and grace, on and off the field, and that quality had endeared him to millions around the world. The bride, who had been watching the scene unfold, approached him once more. This time, she wasn't simply smiling in gratitude but had a more thoughtful expression on her face. "You've made this day unforgettable, Lionel," she said, her voice soft. "We never expected anything like this. We were just happy to have you here. But now, this moment, all of this, it's something we'll remember forever." Messi smiled, though a tinge of discomfort still lingered. He hadn't intended to make the wedding about him, but her words made him feel less like an intruder. If anything, he was helping make their day even more memorable for everyone involved. That, he could accept. "I'm just happy to be here, really." "It's a beautiful wedding," Messi replied, his tone humble. The groom, who had been standing at the edge of the group, joined them with a glass of wine in hand. He clapped Messi on the back, a broad grin on his face. "Come on, Messi. You're part of this celebration now," he said with a laugh. "Everyone here will talk about this wedding for years, just because of you. It's like a dream come true for us." Messi could see that the couple wasn't just being polite. They were genuinely thrilled that he was part of their special day. The feeling was starting to sink in. This wasn't a disruption to the wedding, it was a unique addition to it, something no one would forget. All right, Messi said, his voice lighthearted now. I'll stay for a while longer. But I promise I'm not taking over the dance floor. The groom laughed and pointed to the stage where a live band was playing. Maybe you should. They'd go wild if you did. Messi chuckled, shaking his head. I think I'll leave that to the bride and groom. I'm a better player with my feet on the ground. As the night continued, the atmosphere shifted from one of awkwardness to joy. Messi, still the center of attention, began to feel more at ease. The guests weren't just snapping photos, they were sharing stories with him. People would walk up, tell him about the time they had watched him play in their hometown, or about the match that had inspired them to start playing football themselves. Some of the older guests reminisced about watching Messi play in his early days with Barcelona, his incredible rise from a young, unknown talent to the superstar he had become. For Messi, it was a reminder that his impact stretched far beyond the football field. He wasn't just a name on a jersey or a face on a screen. He was a part of people's lives in a way that was more meaningful than he often realized. At one point, as he was deep in conversation with a middle-aged man who had been a fan of his since the early 2000s, the music switched to a slower, romantic song. The bride and groom stood up, holding hands, ready for their first dance. The guests cheered as the couple moved to the center of the floor, their eyes locked in a moment of perfect harmony. It was clear that they were in their own little world, oblivious to the growing excitement around them. Messi, watching the beautiful moment unfold, felt a pang of appreciation. This was what the day was truly about: the couple, their love, their future together. He had been invited to witness this, and he had the privilege of being a part of it, even if his presence had turned out to be more significant than he ever anticipated. A few minutes into the dance, the groom walked over to Messi again, his expression serious but warm. "Lionel," he said, "we've been planning this wedding for months. And when we invited you, we had no idea this would happen. But I want you to know, this day will go down in history as the day the greatest footballer walked into our wedding." Messi's smile widened. It was clear the groom wasn't simply expressing his gratitude. There was genuine admiration in his words. Messi, for all his humble nature, felt a swell of emotion. It wasn't just about fame or recognition. It was about connection. His presence had made the day even more special for the couple, for the guests. That realization helped him feel more at peace with the unexpected turn of events. Just as Messi was beginning to settle into the idea of being part of the wedding's memories, one of the younger guests came up to him, holding a small notebook. "Could you sign this for my cousin? She couldn't come, but she's a huge fan. She's been sick for a while, and this would really cheer her up." Messi took the notebook with a nod, his heart swelling with empathy. He knew what it was like to have someone whose presence could make all the difference during difficult times. Taking a moment, he wrote a personalized message inside the notebook, wishing the cousin well and sending her his best. "That's for her," Messi said as he handed the notebook back. "Tell her to get well soon." The young guest's eyes lit up, and she hurried away with the notebook pressed close to her chest. Messi watched her go, feeling the weight of his own influence in a way that was different from the stadium lights and the millions of fans shouting his name. Here, in this small village, among a crowd of ordinary people, he had made a genuine impact. It wasn't the kind of recognition he was used to, but it felt even more meaningful than any trophy or award. As the night stretched on and the wedding reached its climax, with more dancing and laughter filling the air, Messi finally allowed himself to relax fully. The once awkward situation had transformed into a beautiful celebration. He wasn't just Lionel Messi, the footballer. He was Lionel, a guest at a wedding who had been invited into a moment of pure happiness and love. At the end of the night, as the guests began to trickle out of the hall, the bride and groom came up to him one last time, their faces glowing with gratitude. "Thank you for being here," the bride said, her voice soft. "It's been an unforgettable day, thanks to you." Messi smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment he hadn't expected. "No, thank you for letting me be a part of it. I'll never forget this wedding." And as he left the venue that night, with the stars shining above and the sound of music fading into the distance, Messi realized that sometimes, the greatest moments are the ones you never plan for. And even when you're not trying to stand out, life has a funny way of making you part of something extraordinary. Thank you very much, see you in the next video.